to start the sonatine by Ravel, first you want to smile to it, to receive the inhalation of goodness it comes from. And you feel... In order to find the right tempo, you have to settle with the breath at the opening, which comes as a rest before even it started. The inside passage work harp, perhaps just a shiver. It's written in 2/4, in 4/8, but it's mostly by thrust. Short, long, and then short, short, long. Ta-da-dum, ta-da-da. It has to sound like almost as if you hold a bird in your hands and it starts flying. You can feel the wings. So practice the lightness of the articulation of the thumb on the edge of the key to obtain the harmonization inside the keys of the 30 seconds of the right hand. It is very clever writing to interlace the two hands as if they're like collaborating for the accompaniment between the usually heavy thumbs as light ballerina tips almost of the legs, of the toes. And the melody softly lit but by thrust in octaves. I don't encourage to play rubato because Ravel was a very specific, detailed man. His Swiss ancestry make people usually refer to him as the watch or clockmaker because of Switzerland, famous for the movement that animates the mechanical clocks. But yes, he's meticulous, but he's not dry. In other words, it has to be not... It's one thing to be correct, another thing is to be right. In other words, to have understood what he wanted, which is this shiver, measured shiver, but shiver nonetheless. If it sounds too measured, it's chopped. In fact, the pedal should come to resonate this articulated 30 seconds. Exactly what it is. It's for harp. It's for harp. So he indicates that moment of hesitation, either escaped, yes, but no. Or not yet, rather. Immediately after the restart, yes, now. This bright A major, F sharp major, major 9. After this F sharp minor. By itself, it shines. Sorry if I'm slipping. In fact, I slipped. Just washed my hands. Is because the finger needs to go to the crescendo for mezzo forte, to the leap of the fifth, and it needs a substitution. 3, 2, 5, not 5, 5, or 3, 3, but and the amount of weight you'll put might make you slip, which I just did. So it has to be very careful. So to practice the softness of the articulation compared to the intensity of the top, you should practice holding. In fact, this detailed articulation is because it's not from above the keys, it's inside the keys. fact, he calls it sonatine not because of a belittling, but because in fact it is condensed form. Everything that could have been displayed in more bar notes, here just go to the essential. It's really a challenge for the pianist, because you have to be anticipating every section, because you don't have time to get comfortable and to prepare the section, enter in the section and leave the section. You have to be ready before. There are three fragments in the exposition I just played. Of course, the first theme. Then there is a second idea, deliberately written as a string quartet. His own string quartet in the F major. He has this fifth accompaniment. Treat it as a string quartet. In the second violin, he has the pattern of the lament with a descending chromatic pattern. Dum, ba, dum, bum, ba, dum. And it's always a sigh. You always exhale. Diminuendo, rediminuendo, rediminuendo. So it means that every first beat of the right hand is a little louder than the accompaniment. If not, it becomes a crescendo with a question mark. Isn't it? Isn't it? When it's in fact. Alternate the thumbs here also, not indicated in the edition, but the opening, we have the alternation of the thumbs, and here I do it for the melodic second violin part. Because if not, it's very uncomfortable to play legato, sung and diminuendo, thumb, thumb, thumb. The pedal will just smear the semitones. So it needs to be clear and voiced and thematically displayed. And the fact you have 3 times the element before it continues, it's very important not to change the color. Like the third element of the fragments of minimal, it's really mini sonata more than sonatina, nano sonata. So, but every detail is inside. In this third element, he indicates slower. So moderato is the opening. The second quartet version idea is in the same tempo. Of course, different mood, because no more 30 seconds. And then the third one, a bit tired. More than that, really lamenting until the chord, which is written long for long fermata, and a tempo of the opening. To conclude the exposition, about the pattern. It's always easier for pianists to find the tempo by the quick notes, because the fingers' synergy industry of playing creates the tempo in the sound. But we have lesser notes. We tend to lose the motoric essence of the tempo. We have to keep it inside, but not on the notes if you didn't write. And then this one a bit slower, but a little bit slower. And then back to tempo. without the 30 seconds, but the same. So when you return with the repeat, you're back in the tempo. If not, you're under tempo, you have to patch it, it's not right. The pedaling. I suggest to have a puff of pedal inside each group of eighth notes of 4/30 seconds, in the second and third 30 seconds, if possible, on the tip of the finger, of the toe. So the passing tones of the melody don't get to have the seconds of the passing tones of the step motion sandwiched, if you want, in the harmony. Of the pedal inside is just to wet slightly the harmonization of the quick 30 seconds, the whispered, shivered whisper, shivering whisper, can you speak? It's possible to start without un accorda if you trust yourself, without the insurance of the right foot pedal to cover in case, no, nor the left pedal insurance for dynamic in case I cannot play articulation but mezzo forte, then I'll put the pedal of the left foot to sort of stifle me. It's not natural, it should be just dosaged enough to control the sound without the need of the left foot for this, and reserve the left foot only when you have a subito effect, like for instance at the end of bar 3, and you want to help yourself drop down, the pianissimo subito, you could use the un accorda just for that drop, and release it again. Unless the melody soar. Is easier to play, all things relative, because the melody is brought out by the fact of being dubbed. But from the soaring from bar 6, 7 on, you don't have any more octavization of the melody, you have just the solo soprano. So you have to play the most intense, melodically beautiful pinky and 4, sometimes 3. So the weak fingers and the heavy fingers on both hands, the 1 and 2, the thumb and the second finger play the accompaniment always too loud. You don't have the capacity to say, like in the opening. So be very, very, very aware of that. Practice the voicing, bringing out the melody by staccato, the bottom part, perhaps even rhythm, and then the top very heavy and very legato. So 4 for the melody, then 3 if it's possible, if not 4, 5, substitution 5, 4, 5, 4, 3, 5, and breathe 4. Well, breathe is more changeable, not interrupt. So these 3 elements are very clear. Module 1, Module 2, Module 3 a little slower, and then conclusion. In the development, Module 1, Module 3 is a bridge, Module 2. Compared to the treatment of this theme the first time, the Module 2, the string quartet. voicing the horns if you want harmonically. And returns the recap. So it's so well written, but in seconds. So instead of playing as a blunt second, which is dissonant by essence, you should voice the top part. Almost as if it was to be thirds. Or sixths. Any consonant interval, but here he uses dissonant intervals, but not dissonantly. And I think that's why they have to be voiced and not. Therefore, of concision, to be able to say everything with so few notes, hints so much at it. It's like, it's sophisticated, it's not simplistic, but it's obvious. And at the same time it has this clarity that the form is like a Haydn form, very pure, clear, no extras, just a little bridge, recap, with the first element. And again, in the same tempo, in the recap, the second module, but string quartetish, in the original key of F sharp, and then in a relative minor, D sharp minor, or at least suggested as such. Module 2, the slower. And he finishes the coda, not in tempo, but sleepy. As if you surrendered your daydream of the third module, which prevails, and not. So he doesn't finish with the opening, he just finishes with the third module, the slower one, as if you daydream away in your sleep, paradoxically. There is something very important to observe in the dynamics notation in Ravel, also common to Debussy, as a matter of fact, is that because they write modular progression of musical thoughts more by echo cells, they have often dynamic markings that are crescendo to piano, or diminuendo to piano, and again diminuendo. So this kind of wavy element of repeating an element is very difficult to play if you think of it as a continuous development. So it's very rare but important when finally a crescendo reaches the climax like it is in the end of the development. That's why it's the only or rare fortissimo. But most of the other crescendi were dropped. That's very proceeding by waves. Debussy does that in Les Joyeuses also, and many composers of the French symbolism movement do that. And we have to play it not as a refrained, if it is the case, climax, rather as a layered progression by fragments. But those fragments are contributive to the general progression, just like by dots, or pointillism, like Seurat's paintings. So you have to be understanding that as a general painting in which not all the elements of tension and release correspond to the, even if it's tonally written, it does not have functionally the tonal system with the tension and releases. Fact is, all these chords could be dominants of others, but they're not. They're just chosen for their coloration, resonance. Which is why very rarely, but when it does, you have a crescendo that reaches a peak. In the opening you have a crescendo which immediately drops again, and the second time opens, finally it reaches the forte and then piano, diminuendo. So you have to re-pick the energy. In order to have the long value louder and diminuendo, and the short softer. Tam taram, pam param, and then more and less, more, less, and more, less, and less. And often one hears, especially with students, the attempt to do more or less, but when it's not intuitive, and it's most of the time counterintuitive, it's not intuitive to do that, then it has to become in second nature if you apply it. But if not, you can think, you feel naturally a progression in the drop of this sort of modal plagal cadence that you hear. And the indications are so it's not just because it's written that you have to observe it, but you don't agree, accept, understand, believe, or even make it your own. It has to become your own truth. You don't want to just play because it's said. Or the teacher, the edition, the publisher, YouTube, anybody somewhere, how sounding, who resonates what. No, it has to become, after you trying it in your practice room, it has to become your truth, like as if you say it by yourself, for yourself. And ultimately, since the movement is very concise, while very intense and very developed, but in a nano-development, like everything is so smaller scale, but every detail is there, you have to be so focused on organizing the whole. Basically, when you start the opening, you already picture how you're going to go through the different sections and make all your path clear in front of you, and you just engage on your rehearsed path. And the unexpected always will happen, but you need to have your drive, and you know where you're going, and you anticipate, and you breathe before, and you organize, and you don't put too much pedal, and you don't crescendo too early, and you wait for the climax, and you don't climax too early, or you don't climax when it's not necessary. For students who get very frustrated in the opening because it's easy to play loud with those thick fingers that Ravel put us for us to play this shiver with thumb and second, is to indulge practicing it mezzo forte. Because there is a danger of trying to play this for right or good reason or wrong reasons called impressionist music, all soft. And then most fingers don't speak, some don't even have a chance to push down the key, so it becomes all just vague whisper with pedal smeared and appearing to be impressionist. And in fact, it is everything but that. In the sense that first you have to then practice to have the depressing of the key quickly deep, even if you play mezzo, and then practice it mezzo piano, then pianissimo, or more pianissimo, then go back to forte, and observe the fingers, especially the ones that have to speak at the edge of the key because of the leverage of the action of the piano. So they speak immediately. So they obey you in order to play soft and from close up. So you can use more flat fingers for the melody and more straight fingers to play precisely the 30 seconds, and first play it all louder as if it's large piece. Observe if you drop down a little notch of dynamic, if you hear everything layered, hierarchized, but everything. And then the least possible, the least loud. Suggest to count by 4 for the 8th notes, but sing the playing and dry count the count. 2, 3, 4. Staccato count, legato play. Like 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And avoid the temptation of 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Because then you follow them. Excuse me, you follow the fingers rather than imposing the pulse to the fingers. And 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you play legato, you count staccato, and you play the 30 seconds articulato. Yourself, oh, it's too loud, I can never manage to play it so soft. It's not that it's too loud, it's that it's not precise enough for the articulation. So you can start practicing the articulation of the thumb lifting from its knuckle, which is unusual because most of the time we play it as a continuation of the arm. But the vertical fingers, of course, we do. So it has to become another vertical finger. The development this almost screaming E minor dominant section where you have the melody, where the sound is the least long naturally on the piano, and then you have to tame those 30 seconds from becoming flat and deep and intense, the 4 and 5, and very light and almost air legato staccato dropped. The thirds that are a broken chord. And the left hand crossing over inside, interlaced for hands. Has to be played from so close to the keys to implement by itself. None of the individual 3 parts are forte. It's the forte only as a group production. I would say mezzo pianissimo for the 30 seconds, mezzo piano, for the eighth notes, and mezzo fortissimo, no, perhaps mezzo forte for the song. And because of the short decay, after you hold the F sharp for a quarter note and you pick it up to bring it back to F sharp, the first short note after the long note should be played under dynamically from where the decay of the first brought it, and then go back immediately to the crescendo. It does appear to be wavy this way, but in the long 4-bar section system, you get the illusion. It's all about make-believe, artifice. Is that you have the length of sound of the F sharp, if not, and you replay it with energy after the F sharp of the quarter note dropped for the 16th note, you'll hear by itself is right, but when you look at the phrasing on 4 bars, you realize that it chops. Instead of having the continuity of a violin going do, dee, dee, do, do, dee, or the voice. And of course, the amount of weight you're going to put on the melody to play with the hand, it depends on how much you can sustain pressure put in by the arm on the palm. That is to play with a flat finger and sustain that amount. If it's too much, you're going to just slide off. Besides, the piano as an instrument, depending on which instrument you play, of course, has a different level of fruition for the sound that blossoms at the moment of playing, and then it can open. In some acoustics and some pianos, you have to accept to play it mezzo forte altogether to preserve the hierarchy of the elements and the beauty of the landscape which is framed in the sonatine. So it's intense but nano. And if you try to force it, because of the race of dynamics that you can't really control, because it's too loud in the accompaniment compared to the song, and this time it's not octave like the opening, would have been perhaps easier, but of course, no, you haven't tried it. So it's preferable to play less, but all, rather than forcefully try to implement it, but then the sound starts screaming. Of course, it's a beauty aesthetically of it, but not at the point where it becomes chopped for the screaming. Ravel was sitting in Salle Cortot, well, not yet Cortot, in Paris in the probably early 30s. And Marguerite Long was giving a master class of some of his works played by her students, a public class, and after the class where Ravel attended, she asked him, Maître, were you satisfied with the interpretation of your works? And he answered to her, on ne m'interprète pas, on me joue, which in French, of course he said, meant in English, one does not make interpretations of my music, one plays my music. As if there is no other way than his. Pax Romana. But in any case, we have to adapt to the instruments. We have to adapt to the acoustic. But what should prevail is the quality of the phrasing, the quality of the sound, the quality of the general merging of the elements, how they fluidly become part of one entity. And so you hear a little bit of everything. And if you have to play it, even if it's a big intensity, you feel more chopped elements. That's why you have to plan from the beginning of the development not to play too loud too early. obliged to play even more, and that's the danger. And if you don't plan ahead, it's too late, because each section is very brief, and next section comes. The second element, the last time the third element, and then the ending. So by the time you blink an eye, it's gone. So you have to be so present in anticipation, mentally, so focused and concentrated, and so free in your hands, and so precise in your tips of the fingers, free in the sense of the arms not being tense by the muscle and the relief of the shoulder, and in this way you can just monitor the minimal dosage of milligrams of weight between this and that. It's all about balance, about aesthetics of refined collaboration between the voices, the fusion of the elements. Of course, one can take also in account the fact that there is not only a first movement in the sonatine. The sonatine is not the first movement. The sonatine is really three movements, obviously, since they exist. He calls the second menuet in a sort of a reverence to the French past of harpsichord school. Of long and short, or short and long, short, long, the 3/8, short, long, and then inverting it to long, short, long, short, long, short. And when he slurs the long, short on 2 bars, he creates, of course, the hemiola. What else? Then becomes long, short, long, short, short. The cadence with the inversion of the pulse, short, long, long, short, long. So to still distantly evoke the rhythm of the dance and the steps of the dance rather, but gracious and distant. Circle of fifths. So very classical in the structure of the let's say the skeleton, but dressed up in very luscious major, D flat major harmonies. And the last movement, the toccata, like. Me a lot of the Italian concerto by Bach, where the first movement has all the thematical material, the second is this song, the aria, and the third is this fast toccata, at least a 2-part invention. And here it's also a little bit of that. The second and third are character pieces. The first is more string quartet, pure music in a certain sense, but not dancey or so. Suggestive of different elements, obviously. I think he needed specifically to call it sonatine because of the concision of the shape, not because of the lesser, let's say, melodic or harmonic input or drive or meaning. And at the same time, he admired Haydn the most because he was of course, attributed to him is the invention of the two-theme sonata form. And so it's an exercise in clear mind, how to just display three elements, develop two. There is an elegance in the untold, undeveloped, unredundant. And most of the time, he doesn't develop the thought continuously, but he just repeats the element, like I call the echo cells. And again, this one, and again, and again. So there is an insistence, and here, and again. So basically, I will just give you an example of what could have been if he did not have that, and we just take off all the repetitivity of the thematical material, and you do. Redundancies, you see almost nothing is left. It's almost like poetic stuttering when he repeats himself. And instead of repeating it directly, it's 10% of the piece. So in other words, it's like a deflated tire. It's yeah. It's basically a nonsense to even suggest it, but to visualize it is to understand then not to play affected the repetitivity with a second time echo or second time louder. Just let it be and let it repeat itself. And not trying. We don't want to appear as a performers, the people who interpret his music, right? He didn't like people to do interpretation. As if we try to justify that these repeats are perhaps boring to the audience or to us, and we have to colorize it and make it more attractive with shades and lights. And the interpretation is the license not to kill the piece, but the license to narrate it with your own words according to what you understood from the composer's words. So it couldn't and shouldn't be purely phonetic recitation of the specific edition and be just only the text which was there before us will be there after us. So yes, we have to serve it. We are the servants of the muse. We shouldn't impose our piece, but then write our own. I agree with that. My teacher repeated it to me often. Of course, I never was shy of writing my own. But when I play the others, I really want to play the others with my understanding of the others' music and not my music over them or theirs. And therefore, if we understand how the or try to understand why and how, if not the why, the how of this repetitivity, then we accept it, and it's part of the language. It's part of the. It's part of the piece. The piece without these redundancies doesn't exist anymore. And they're not redundancies. They're per se so because you repeat an element. But if you don't, then you should have developed it differently. Of course, it will be another piece. in terms of length and display, like a Schubert sonata, which has sort of leads. Well, it's a long story, but here the point is that we have to be so close to what he suggested, hinted. Thank you.